Well, there's only 2 games left in the college football season, and because the Buckeyes are in the second semifinal, they know exactly what's in front of them. A win tonight over Texas, and Ohio State would play Notre Dame in the national championship game on Monday, January 20th in Atlanta. The Cotton Bowl tonight in Arlington. It's the national semifinals. Let's give you a quick game day preview next on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State
with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today.
Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to Cotton Bowl night. It's Friday, January 10th, and it is hopefully the second to the last stop for the Ohio State Buckeyes here in the 2024 season after the calendar has flipped over into January. Brendan Gulick, Anthony Moeglin with you. We're at home. We made the decision before Mother Nature made it on our behalf to cover remotely tonight because of the pretty awful weather down in the DFW area. Anticipate that it's going to be a disaster for a couple of days down there. I'm sure you've probably at home seen some of the videos that are circulating around social media. It looks pretty awful. So we did not make the trip to Arlington. Should the Buckeyes win, we'll tackle that once we get there. But should Ohio State do that, we'll certainly be on site in Atlanta for a national championship tilt. And Anthony, I think we're feeling. Maybe I shouldn't speak for you. I'm feeling very confident that that's going to happen. Texas is a good team, and I think they'll give Ohio State a decent test. But I think Ohio State's going to win this game convincingly tonight. I'm pretty excited for that.
Yeah, it certainly feels that way. Ohio State, when you look across the board, you could go position by position, and you'd pretty much pick the Buckeyes at every single one of them. And that's not to say that Texas doesn't stand a chance in this game or doesn't deserve it or whatever. But this Ohio State team has gotten progressively better, and we've just seen it these past couple of weeks. And it's been really remarkable since the Tennessee game and the Oregon game, what this team has done. You go through social media and all that stuff, and you see like Death Star Ryan Day and Buckeyes, Ohio against the world and all this stuff. And it feels like this Ohio State team has taken on this almost villain personality where they're just like, hey, we've been to the lowest point and it doesn't matter. We're just going to destroy everything in front of us. And it doesn't matter who it is, what brand it may be. We're just going to take them down. And they're playing with an incredible amount of confidence, something that we haven't seen from this Buckeyes team in the past couple of years. And it's a scary sight if you're caught in the crosshairs with the Buckeyes coming down.
And listen, like I want to recognize the fact that Ohio State's lost twice this year, right? It's not that they're unbeatable. But what we've seen, the sample size from them recently has given me an incredible amount of confidence coming into tonight, in addition to this specific matchup. For me, it's the fact that they lost again to Michigan and were sort of exposed for trying to have this run to set up the pass. We want this balance. We want to be tough. We're going to run up between the tackles. We're going to prove a point. The idea that they did that and it didn't work and it blew up in their face, and they had to have some really hard conversations, in the aftermath of that loss. And it turned into the philosophy that we've seen from them against Tennessee and against Oregon, where they've completely eviscerated, totally dominated 2 good teams. I would argue Oregon's an elite team. Tennessee, I think, is a very good team. I think Ohio State, to your point, the idea of the confidence, the defense is playing with speed and with freedom in a way that nobody has lit them up this year. And the offense right now is playing with an aggressiveness that when they go do that, they're pretty much unbeatable. When they don't go do that, they're vulnerable. And I think because they should, there's no excuse if they have a bad mindset coming into this game. If they come in with a game plan that looks like it did against Michigan, they deserve to lose, right? You can't win the game that way with this personnel. If they approach this game the way they did the last couple of weeks, I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win convincingly.
And they really should. And the reason we're saying this is because, like, when you're Texas right now and you're trying to develop this path to victory, how do we win this football game? And specifically when Texas is on defense, how do you stop these Ohio State Buckeyes? And you're like, all right, past couple games, we got to stop number 4. Wherever Jeremiah Smith is, we got to send our 2 best to go get him. But the problem is Ohio State just comes in waves, right? If you take Jeremiah Smith away, guess what? Emeka Egbuka is going to go crazy. If you try to take both of those guys away, Carnell Tate's our number 3 receiver. He's probably, he's probably a number 1 on every single other program in the entire United States. And hey, if you want to just drop a bunch of dudes in the coverage to protect against the pass, we're going to run it down your throat with maybe the top 2 best running backs in all of football and an offensive line that, while patchwork for sure, has grown and talk about confidence, has become a group that, you rewind 3 or 4 weeks, you're talking about them being a serious weak link on this team. They're now a really strong point, right? They were really, really good against Oregon, and they've just grown and grown and grown. And it's like, how do you stop this Buckeye offense? And the answer is you can't. You just got to try to contain them, and to try to do that is a recipe for disaster.
The idea of Ohio State having some balance in the run versus pass game, I think on the stat sheet, ultimately, it may show that there's some balance, but it's Ohio State's ability to run effectively out of traditional passing formations. They're using their speed and they're scheming things up in a way that spreads the defense out. If you hit some shots early in the game to wide receivers, you can't just pack the box, right? And that's where Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins then can really hurt you, because they're not necessarily the kind of guys that you're just going to see run in the A gap or B gap over and over and over again and wear you down. That's not necessarily what their skill set is at its best. And I think these last couple weeks, the way Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have designed this offense, we've seen those guys getting in space in lots of different ways, getting them the ball. It's been fun to watch. So I anticipate that Ohio State's going to have a creative kind of game. I am almost always team, if you win the coin toss, team defer. If I'm Texas tonight, if I win the toss, I want the ball. Mm-hmm. I want to try to score first, because also, by the way, I think Sark is one of the best in the country at scheming up, first and second drives of games. I think Texas needs to try to score here early in the game, because they've seen how Ohio State can boat race somebody early on like they have the last 2 weeks if they don't do that.
Well, I would even add to that too. It's like, hey, I would, in that same vein, I would take the ball just so Ohio State doesn't have it. Even if that possession doesn't end in points. Joel Klatt was talking about it this week, how the number one thing on Texas's mind has to be win the first quarter, because you look back the last 2 games, it's been 14-0, 21-0, even 24-0 at the end of the first quarter, and the game's over, right? At that point, there's no way. You have to play perfect football to come back if you're the opponent. And for Texas tonight, it's got to be like, hey, we need to just survive this onslaught that's been the first quarter. And frankly, Brendan, I think that's going to be the way they approach it. I think they're going to play it super conservative from that perspective, and that's Texas, that is, of, hey, do everything in your power to not let the big play happen early, to not let the crowd get into it early, and not let Ohio State get rolling really quickly. And I would say to our fans, like, hey, if it does start slow, I think that's going to be the intent of Texas, of like, hey, don't let Ohio State get out of the gates flying like they've done in the past couple games. Make them have to get into the second and third quarter and still have to execute, because they haven't proven in 6 weeks that they've had to do that. Not because they can't, just because they haven't needed to. So I think that's how Texas is going to try to approach this early on, of like, hey, play keep away as long as you can and prevent Ohio State from hitting these massive plays that have just flipped the game these past 2 outings.
I mean, not so much this year, but certainly in years past, that was kind of Michigan's philosophy. Mm-hmm. And ultimately it won them the games. I look at, like, okay, the specific matchup, like, take all the hyperbole, all the hype, take that out for a minute. Like, how do the Buckeyes line up against Texas when they have the ball or when they're on defense? And one of the things that really stands out to me, Texas's offensive line is big. They're a physical group for sure. And I think they've largely had a really good season. In the 2 losses they've had to Georgia, they gave up 11 sacks, 5 in one game, 6 in another. So it's not like they were even totally, loaded where maybe one game had 9 sacks and the other had 2. The point is they struggled in both games against a good defensive line. I think Ohio State's defensive line is definitely better than Georgia's this year, but it's certainly at least in the same ilk. I think with the way Ohio State's defensive line is playing, like Quinn Ewers is a mobile quarterback. Obviously, Ohio State fans certainly know more about him than they might know about most other, opposing quarterbacks, just given the history he's had with Ohio State. He can make some things happen. And I expect Texas to probably get some points early in the game because he's a good player. Mm-hmm. But I think Ohio State is going to put a lot of pressure on him. And in the games where he's played and slipped up, he's underthrown some balls and he's been a little erratic. And I think Ohio State's secondary, which is playing extremely well, will hold up enough. Like good coverage is gonna, it will eventually crumble if you have good protection. Good protection beats good coverage every time. Every time. I don't think Texas's offensive line is going to be able to hold up for long enough for Texas's skill position guys to consistently get open. That's kind of where I look at this and think, like, I just don't see Texas with a 28 point game tonight. And I think it's going to take at least that for them to win.
Well, and you make a good point, and we talked about this when they played Tennessee. In Tennessee, I sat on this very podcast saying how big their offensive line was and how much of a challenge it was going to be for Ohio State. But the thing about Ohio State's defensive line, JT, Jack Sawyer, Ty, like these guys have this incredible and unique combination of speed and strength, size and speed specifically.
And Kenyatta Jackson. I mean, it's not just the starting four; it's their depth has played so well.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. And what stands out with Texas's offensive line, and yes, their 2 tackles are going to be awesome, Banks and Williams. Those are 2 first-round guys, but in the interior of Ohio State, the defensive linemen who have been pushing the pocket, who have been doing a great job allowing your 2 edge rushers to just kind of pin their ears back and go because they have the middle secured. That's where I see Ohio State having a serious advantage. And where a smaller quarterback like Quinn Ewers, like Quinn's great. He's not the biggest guy. When you press that pocket and you condense that space, you're making a 6-foot kid. I'll give him 6 foot, but you're making a smaller quarterback having to look over immediate pressure right in his face. It's going to make it really challenging. And then to that point, Ohio State's secondary is fantastic. If you talk about the weak link of this defense, Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun have certainly been talked down upon all year long, but they've been awesome, right? The last couple of weeks, they've been great. And it helps to have the safeties that they do with Caleb Downs, Jordan Hancock, Lathan Ransom, who've been playing just amazing football. It's going to be a really, really hard night for Texas. And you said it earlier, not on the show, but when we were talking, like, do you see a world where Texas scores over 20 points?
I think that's really hard for them to do tonight.
And if it's really hard for them to do, like, do you see a world where Ohio State doesn't score 20 points? Like, no. I don't see where those things I don't see that intersection.
Yeah. No, I don't know that it's going to be a 34-0 start like it was against Oregon. I have a hard time seeing that. It's possible, but like I think Texas is playing with enough confidence. I know they didn't look great in their first 2 playoff wins, but you win a couple playoff games, you're clearly among the class of the country in terms of the elite teams. And they've got a bunch of NFL caliber players. So I don't think that they're going to get steamrolled early, but I see this game as like a 38-13, and then maybe Texas scores like a late touchdown to make it 38-20 kind of thing. So it looks a little tighter. I think Texas somewhere along the way tonight is going to have to try something a little different. It was pointed out earlier that, Arch Manning obviously wears 16 and that there's another number 16 on Texas's punt team. So maybe the Buckeyes get caught napping or whatever. If they slide Arch in there wearing the same number, maybe there's a punt fake, something like that. Special teams wins games in moments like this. And I'm not just talking about kicking a game-winning field goal like Notre Dame did last night. It's the ability to execute the punt correctly. It's the way Ohio State against Indiana flip the game because of two big special teams plays. Obviously, one of them was a punt return for a touchdown. I expect that Ohio State is going to execute. I know Jaden Fielding has had some moments this year where he's been a little shaky, but all in all, I just expect Ohio State to look the way they've looked because I think they're prepared the right way. It's a veteran group that's been through a lot. The clip went viral the other day when Kirk Herbstreit said it. I totally agree. But he talks about Ohio State having this super expensive roster. It's not like they brought all these guys in. They just kept their players. They're all a bunch of 4th and 5th year guys that were good enough to go to the NFL last year and said, we don't want this thing to end the way that it's gone with losses to Michigan routinely and not winning a national championship or a Big Ten title. And this group is playing with such confidence right now. How about Cody Simon? I think people at the beginning of the year expected Cody Simon might be like a fine linebacker. Cody's played outstanding football here in the playoffs. So I just expect this group to do what they've done. And maybe it's not good enough. Maybe Texas beats them, but I think it's going to take a hell of an effort if they lose.
Yeah, you play this scenario, you play this game 100 times, and I can't see Texas winning it more than 10, right? It's just the way that I think it's going to go. And I do think that it's going to be closer early. It's not going to be, in my opinion, the feeling we had against Tennessee, the feeling we had against Oregon, where you and I were in the press box at the Rose Bowl and you're like, are we going to win this game by 30 points? And it was like
that first touchdown, I looked at you and I said, it's going to be a 30-point win. I think it was going to be 34-0 at middle of the second quarter.
No, I do think it'll be a little bit closer early. There may be some, times where maybe Texas is in the lead, but I just think Ohio State's depth, their ability, their wants right now, their hunger is going to be too much. And I used this word earlier. I feel like the Buckeyes are inevitable, and I don't know if it's going to happen in the third quarter, if it's going to happen in the first play of the fourth. It might happen in the last play of the game, but I just have this feeling in me that there's nothing Texas is going to be able to do to stop the Buckeyes. I think the only way that Ohio State gets beat is if they beat themselves. And I just don't see that happening with this group. So a quick prediction for me, I got Ohio State 34. You get 2 field goals from Jaden Fielding. You get 4 touchdowns from the offense, and Texas 21. So a little bit closer than some may be predicting, but I think it's going to be a good night for the Bucs.
I like that too. I guess I would say the only thing that I am interested to see, in these first 2 playoff games, because of the way the games have started, the Buckeyes really haven't felt the heat yet. You go up 21 rip on Tennessee, go up 34-0 on Oregon. The game was played under their terms the whole way. They dictated the rhythm, the tempo, the vibe, everything. How do they handle being punched? Because somewhere along the way, it's unlikely that you're going to have 3 consecutive games where you're just bludgeoning a team, especially at this stage of the game. We're not talking about playing Western Michigan or Akron or Marshall. Like, these are good teams. Somewhere along the way, Texas is going to throw a punch. And how bad does it hurt? And if Will Howard throws a pick, how quickly can he flush it? If Ohio State fumbles deep in the red zone and it turns into a Texas score quickly, how quickly can they flush it? That's the kind of thing that I want to see tonight, because it's hard to win a championship. I think they're the best team in the country. I think they're the best team on paper. I think they are far and away better than Texas, in my opinion. But Texas is capable of winning this game, and Ohio State is going to have to figure out a way to slow things down appropriately if they need it, because I don't think this game's going to be played at warp speed. I think Texas is going to try to control a good chunk of the game, especially in the first half, and see if they can wear the Buckeyes down a little bit. So how do they respond with some adversity? That's the only thing that I am going into this game kind of wondering, because I think we've come to expect enough of what we've already seen.
And not to say they can't do it, right? They just haven't had to in the last 6 weeks, 7 weeks, right? It's been a long time since you've had to scratch that competitive itch of theirs of, hey, things aren't going the right way. Because I think it's totally underrated what you started with there of both of the Tennessee and Oregon game were not only played on Ohio State's terms, but they were played. They forced both of their opponents to play a type of football that you only play in video games, where you just have to drop back and try to make plays. And they may have to get into a game where they have to play for 60 minutes tonight, or 40 or 50 minutes of real, actual competitive football.
Yeah, well, we'll find out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely bummed not to be on site tonight, but I think it was the right call with the crazy weather. So I hope folks will join us post-game. We are planning to go live like immediately after the game ends, and we'll have plenty to talk about. We'll have lots to break down from tonight, what went right, what went wrong, and hopefully talking about what will be a national championship game appearance coming up in a week and a half. In the meantime, it's obviously a ton of fun. You hope that you get a chance to play games of this consequence. And, for better or for worse, there are few teams in the country that have had these kinds of opportunities more regularly than Ohio State, not including the COVID-shortened season in 2020. Ohio State has 12 consecutive seasons with at least 11 wins. Nobody else in the country has a longer such streak. Georgia second with 7 straight. And, we're talking about an Ohio State team that's now playing in their 6th of the first 11 iterations of the college football playoff. They are regularly at this point. These are the expectations, but when you get these opportunities, there's still a lot of fun, and certainly hoping that the Buckeyes will play well tonight. For Anthony Moeglin, I'm Brendan Gulick. We'll see you post game. Buckeyes, Texas Longhorns coming up in the Cotton Bowl in a couple hours.